Hello, Phil Croshaw here from Passions, and in this episode, Dr. Jane Galton joins me to talk about cheetahs. Hello, Phil Croshaw here, and a very warm welcome to this episode of Passions. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Dr. Jane Galton from the Cheetah Conservation Fund. I know it's CCF, so I was sort of worried I'd get that wrong, but I think I've got it right. Dr. Galton, thanks very much for joining me today. Would you like to just start off by telling me what your passion is?
Well, yes, I sort of thought about that, and I thought, well, how does one even define a passion? Because my husband is a passionate fisherman, and we've talked about the difference between a passion and a hobby. You know, some people say, well, I like to, I don't know, study photograph, whatever. But I think passion is something, for me anyway, it's something slightly different. I think it's a bit more like it's something that consumes you. And actually, if you're not careful, you make decisions that you don't really think about the consequences of. So you just go head first into things, and then you worry about how you're going to deal with it afterwards. So it's, for me, particularly with my passion, it's slightly, it can get a little bit out of control. So in terms of what my passion is animals, basically. I think I came out of the womb sort of loving animals, and of course I've spent most of my life, at least 50-60% of my life, overseas. So it started off with domestic animals, but then as we moved overseas, I was able to sort of, start thinking about wildlife. And so that's my passion. It hasn't been my career until the last 10 years. So it hasn't been my career, but I've sort of made it my last sort of career, if you like, in a way.
Fabulous. Okay, well, we'll come back to that in a minute. So just tell me a little bit about CCF and tell me about what it is you tend to do there and what your main line of work is.
Well, I'm on the board of trustees of CCF UK and CCF US. And our organisation, we're part of an international affiliate group. The headquarters of CCF, or Cheetah Conservation Fund, is in Namibia, but we have partners we work with other NGOs in other cheetah range countries in Africa. There's only 50 Asiatic cheetahs left now, and those are in Iran. So we also have connections there as well. And so our goals in the UK are quite limited to raising awareness and raising funds to send to Africa, because I think the cheetah is the forgotten cat. Everybody thinks of a big cat and they think, oh yes, the lion, the tiger, the leopard, and the cheetah's sort of a little bit forgotten. And I don't think anybody realizes there's only 7,000 left in the world. And they are now the most endangered big cat in Africa. So we're trying to, develop an awareness around that and talking about the main threats to the cheetah, which is there three or four. So human wildlife conflict, the illegal wildlife trade, where cheetahs are snatched from their mothers, trafficked up through Somaliland, and then into the Middle East, where they're sold as pets. and habitat destruction, and also a reduction in prey species, so they don't have enough food for themselves. So the Dr. Malka has developed this amazing holistic set of programs which respond to these threats.
All right, it's amazing. So it's interesting actually, because I'm just thinking here that your passion, you said at the start that your passion is animals. So then the next layer down, isn't there, in a way, is the passion is animals, and then the next layer down is your passion is cheetahs. Why cheetahs in particular?
I think I've always loved cats, always big cats. And I was lucky enough I met Laurie, and then I actually went out to visit her in Namibia, which is where the headquarters are. And I don't know, there's something quite extraordinary about them. Not just the fact that they're the fastest animal, but they are just so beautiful. And I think also because they're so endangered, your heart sort of goes out to them. And they're just the most beautiful, iconic, elegant, and unfortunately for them in some ways, quite gentle big cat. So they're the only big cat that purrs. And that means that unfortunately they're relatively easy to domesticate. But I think it's just all those aspects of them. If you look at them, they look straight at you, and they just have so much emotion in their eyes. I mean, they're just the most beautiful, beautiful creatures. And so, yeah, I just completely fell in love with them.
It's wonderful. I can see that.
Sort of, it was also feeling that, you know, they need to be saved, and you know, wanting to work towards that to make sure that they don't disappear, because they are really, really racing towards extinction, unfortunately. So we have to, you know, work to keep them going.
Absolutely. And you're recording this in the midst of the global pandemic. What sort of impact has the pandemic had on the charity and the animals themselves?
In terms of the charity, a third of our funding comes from people visiting the headquarters in Namibia, where you can actually go and see conservation in action. And so obviously they had to close down. So there's no tourists, there's no paying guests, no interns who, you know, volunteers who go there to maybe do a couple of weeks. And, you know, they have to pay for that because that helps fund the work. So that's really had a huge impact on our income. And that just means that we can't fund some of the programs as much as we'd want to. We also actually, in Namibia, because Laurie's got such an amazing relationship with the government, we are sometimes given other animals to steward them. And so we've got African wild dogs on the site as well. And we're doing some African wild dog programs, but it's quite difficult to get funding for those. So that's had an impact, and we're monitoring it very carefully at the moment. But it's the same for all wildlife, because there's no tourism. It means that rangers can't be supported anymore. There's a limit to how much these organizations can implement their programs. So it means that the poachers have, which is now part of organized crime, the poachers now have, you know, much more freedom to take wildlife. And in our case, you know, in the case of elephants and rhinos, it's product. In our case, it's the live animals, which people, again, it's a business that people don't really know very much about. So we haven't seen a dramatic increase in that yet, but a slight increase. So we're monitoring that at the moment. We just put a report into DEFRA about about that. So yeah, we're monitoring it, and I can't give you the definitive answer about the increase in poaching or not, but we are monitoring it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I find it quite staggering in a sense that when I think of leopards as pets or on a chain, I think of some TV movie, from ancient Egypt.
Yeah.
The fact that it's still happening and still going on, I find quite remarkable and quite shocking, to be honest.
Well, I think it's you're right. There's always been that relationship between, Egyptian princes and Middle Eastern princes having a wild animal, and cheetahs in those days were used for hunting. And I suppose it was there were many more around in those days. So I don't think people, thought about it a lot. But as the numbers are decreasing, and we call it the social media click sort of impetus. People in the Middle East, if they have a pet cheetah, they get much higher social media clicks on their Facebook pages, or Instagram pages. So social media is actually fueling the trade,
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done quite a few of these interviews so far, and that's probably almost like the open mouth point.
I know, it's terrible.
I always pick up all sorts of different insights from people and from stories people tell doing this, and I've been doing this quite a long time. But I have to say that the very idea that people are partly doing it just because they want to get more clicks on Instagram is horrific.
Yeah,
in a way.
It's also a way of wealthy Arabs showing off even more of their wealth. So you'll see all these photographs with them with a cheetah has a diamond collar around its neck, sitting in their Lamborghini, with a chain. The unfortunate thing is, because most of them don't know how to look after them, many of them die. They're kept in cages in a basement, and many of them don't make it past 2 years. So it's very sad. And because it's very difficult to breed cheetahs in captivity, you then have to go back into the wild, and it's beginning to completely decimate very small, fragile populations of cheetahs in the Horn of Africa. So we are working, to reduce the supply through a grant we've got with DEFRA, and also to reduce the demand. So yeah, it's a serious problem.
Yeah, I just find that absolutely unbelievable, to be honest. Because obviously, in media terms, I would say that the elephants and the ivory trade tends to, as I perceive it, as an outsider looking in, seems that tends to get most of the publicity.
Yes, that's very true. And it comes back to what I was saying, is that the cheetah is sort of not just the forgotten big cat, but people don't really, if you look at, I don't know, other charities that focus on many more than just one animal, you think of the animals they put up there, the rhino, the tiger, the snow leopard, but the cheetah is sort of forgotten. And it's very interesting because when I took over running the charity, which I sort of fell into, quite frankly, all the people we've now got 70 volunteers and a small sort of cadre of staff, but everybody, the one thing that holds everybody together is this passion for the cheetah, and they're just completely passionate about it. So, but as you say, not many people are aware of this live trade, but it is now the 4th largest illegal trade in the world. It's worth about 60 billion a year. So if you think of snakes, reptiles, birds, cheetah, chimpanzees, monkeys, whatever, it's a massive illegal criminal trade.
Well, hopefully, as a result of this interview, maybe a few more people will be more aware and more conscious of the situation. I certainly am. So that's one more person.
And if anybody wants to come and volunteer with us, they can always get in touch with me.
Absolutely. And I'll ask you actually towards the end as to how people can get in touch and websites and such like. Okay, I want to pick up now on something you said about you'd only kind of ended up in this arena as a career only 10 years ago. Now, tell me about that. Tell me what happened before then. And were you always wanting to get into making a career out of your love of animals? How did all that happen?
Well, I, you know, how did my love of animals develop? I don't think it developed. I just think I came out of the womb and that was it. You know, from the first time in my life, I can just remember being completely in love with animals. So I did a zoology degree, and but you know, it was a while ago, and conservation was still a burgeoning sort of sector. And we didn't get much career guidance at university. I was absolutely fascinated with animal behavior, and you know, absorbed all these books, but I didn't really know how to get into it. Nobody sort of, you know, gave me any advice. So so I didn't really know how to progress that. But my other wasn't a passion. My other goal was to save the world of cancer. So just a little goal. So I thought, right, you know, so how can I do that? Anyway, so I ended up doing a PhD in immunology, and I ended up doing. So I went to the States then for about 10 years, and I worked at NYU Medical Center and at UCLA. And I was doing immunotherapy research. So now I think it's common now, people talk about monoclonal antibodies and everything. But in those days, this is like 25, 30 years ago, this was 25 years ago, this was still a very new field. And we were trying to make immunotherapy to treat cancer patients. So I ended up doing that for quite a while. And then I thought, right, I'll try something else. So I went into the pharmaceutical sector and decided to do an MBA, and went into marketing, business development. I won't bore you with what I did, but then I met my husband, and he worked for the British government and was posted overseas. And it was so we then moved to Oman, Nigeria, and Mexico. And it was while I was in Nigeria that I really realized that the corporate profit sector is really not my bag. So I started doing international development work projects for the UK Aid Agency, for Population Services International, things like that, around maternal health, HIV. And I then realized that that was what interested me. So I then sort of, it's like, you know, it's like having a portfolio career, you know.
Yes.
Every country I went to, I had to reinvent myself, you know. So I then ended up sort of working for the last sort of, I would say, 15 years of my career working in international development. And that was a variety of things in maternal health. In Mexico, I worked for a human rights NGO, working with, you know, UNHCR and for this NGO in Mexico City. And then when we came back to the UK about 10 years ago, I carried on working in international development, and I was fortunate enough to be introduced to this guy who had an NGO in Kenya working with elephants called Space for Giants. And so I said to Dr. Max Graham, I said, you know, if you want to really sort of start raising serious money, you need to have a charity in the UK. So I helped set up the charity here. I was a founding trustee of Space for Giants, and then I was on the board for 5 years. I learned a huge amount of stuff, you know, a huge amount about conservation, so thanks to Max, I was able to learn a lot about that. And it was while I was on that board that I was introduced to Laurie, and that's when I literally was just blown away by the work she was doing. So she asked me to join the board, and I don't know if that answers everything, whether I've gone a bit off piece.
No, not at all. It's very much, it's very relevant, because part of this whole passions journey is, part of it is actually maybe to help other people to realize that actually, you can get to, shall we say, midlife for the sake of the discussion. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that because you're doing what you're doing, that you can't make a move, you can't make a change. Did you find Absolutely. That, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, obviously, but did you find that arguably when you were in what you might call business development and commercial, you weren't particularly fulfilled? After that, then when you started to get into all the sectors you've just described, were you significantly more fulfilled? And were you aware of that you were more fulfilled?
Yes, absolutely. I just felt that I needed, I've always felt that. I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have gone off and been a scientist. I just felt that I needed, that I needed to have a meaningful career that wasn't just about profit and the bottom line. I mean, there were bits of it I enjoyed. It was very challenging, and I worked for KPMG in Oman as a management consultant, and that was fascinating. But it was all about the chargeable hours, and very much focused on that. So when I started working in international development, it just made sense to me. It just resonated. This is what I wanted to do. And it was while I was doing that I realized, and I think this is a really important sort of pivotal moment for me, but I think for other people, and I can describe that a bit later. But I realized that, okay, I didn't know anything about conservation, but I had really good skills that were transferable. So when I met Max, I had a lot of experience in business development, which of course you can use in any sector really. And so he trained me or taught me about conservation and the programs and what was going on, and I read a lot. And then I was then able to help him do the fundraising through grant writing and hosting events and things like that. And so I think it's important for people to say, okay, well, I know nothing about whatever it is sector you want to go into, but to look at the skills that you have and think, well, which ones are transferable, And so that's what I did. And I worked during that whole time. So I had a flat out, 14, 15 hours a day job. And then I'd have to come home and start working on the conservation stuff, so it was quite a busy time.
So I guess the passion that you had for that gave you extra energy and stamina to do that, even though you were probably a bit weary from the day.
Exactly.
And I often call it side hustles, actually. And that could be something as simple as having entrepreneurial tendencies, as I call it, where you've got a day job and you've got the wages fairy coming every month, which is great. But then these days with the internet, I don't think people fully realize the opportunities to have side hustles has never been better.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can just sort of try and build something up, while you've still got the income. And if I had done it early enough, then I would definitely have turned it into a career. But I didn't. I was living overseas for 16 years with Clive, and in countries where, I mean, that wasn't really on the cards. I mean, Nigeria, there's no wildlife. Well, there's limited wildlife in the east. But maybe if I'd lived in Kenya, for example, I might have then used my skills to immediately transfer into the wildlife sector, conservation sector. But I think if you do it early enough, then you can transfer it. And it's interesting because the volunteers, as well as the part-time people who've joined CCF in the UK, they are using their skills, which I don't have. And the deal is they volunteer. The deal is I teach them about conservation. That's a quid pro quo. So it's a win-win. And in fact, one of the PR, the woman who came in and helped us with PR, she's just signed up to do a wildlife conservation management master's. at Bristol Zoo, and she's been able to be accepted because she's had this background with CCF. So
brilliant. I'm really glad actually you mentioned transferable skills, because it's so relevant actually nowadays. And I have conversations quite often with clients and people who are thinking about career changes and everything else. And the one thing, and especially in current times where employment is looking somewhat difficult, let's put it that way. And I'm amazed at how many people don't really get the fact that they have all these skills: communication, problem solving, decision making, long list, creativity. But they think that they've been doing this job for 10 years, and they absolutely freak out at the idea of doing something else, because, well, I don't know anything else other than laundry, whatever it is that they're doing. And it's something that I often talk to people about. So I think it's great to hear you talk about the importance of transferable skills, and also being self-aware that you've got those transferable skills.
Yes, I mean, maybe, yes, absolutely. And it's very interesting you bring that up, because I've helped a number of people with their CVs, and I look at them and I go, well, I know that you can do this. And they go, yeah, but it's like, well, that's part of my job. And I remember helping one friend, and I said, but you have such amazing organizational skills. Which she said, well, that's just normal. I said, no, it's not.
It's not.
People don't have that ability. So you need to put that in your CV, and all those things that people just take, the fact that they can do it well, they sort of take it for granted and don't think that it's something that, an employer or maybe if you want to really transfer your career, you go and volunteer in a charity to start with and learn that way. But people just don't think that what they've got is that amazing,
Yeah. I think I take it a little bit for granted, because I love variety and get bored easy. My whole career, even my corporate career, was shifting from travel to IT to training and development to mobile phones, just because I enjoyed learning new things and getting new experiences.
Exactly.
Just like you said about portfolio working, basically.
Yeah. I used to call it my tapestry career.
Yeah, I like that. That's even better than portfolio career, actually.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
Nice. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Well, I could talk to you forever, as always, as I always can with people, because everybody's got such interesting stories. Just to conclude then, do you want to just give us a bit of information as to how people can find out more about the CCF and actually how they can contact you and the team to maybe volunteer if this interview has resonated with them?
Yes. You can visit us on our website, which is www.cheetah.org.uk. And you can contact me directly at jane@cheetah.org.uk.
Fantastic. I'm going to ask you one more question, because I've just remembered you said something earlier. You talked about, I'm trying to remember exactly how you put it, but yes, that was right, about how passion can, as I read it, you were almost suggesting that passion can get you in a little bit of hot water. And I'm just wondering to what degree that was part of the traveling into these remote areas of Africa. And actually going, oh yes, here I am in the African bush with my passion, and in the meantime there's about 13 wild animals tearing up behind you.
Oh, I mean, that's gone from borrowing monkeys that have been taken from the wild and kids are running around with them, so I sort of borrow them and disappear off, which is not the safest thing to do in the middle of the bush. Yeah. And then I let them free. But the funniest one, which is not to do with wildlife, but it was when we were in Senegal for meetings, and I saw a blind, well, I didn't know it was blind at the time, a blind kitten in the gutter of a Senegalese market when we were living in Nigeria. And cut a long story short, I decided that I was going to take it back to Nigeria. So I sequestered it in my bra and got it on the plane.
Oh my God.
So I got it on the plane.
Kids, don't try this at home.
Completely illegally. And got it back to Nigeria. And we named him Tintin, of course, French West Africa. And somebody adopted him, and he lived for a very happy 18 years in Manchester.
Wonderful. I thought you were going to say, and here he is.
Here's another one I just made.
Here's another one I just got. Yeah. Oh, crikey, that is wonderful.
So there are many stories that I can tell you.
Yeah. Well, what we'll do another interview, and we'll just talk about the stories of the wild. And fantastic, wonderful.
Yeah.
Right, Dr. Galton, thanks ever so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Some really good stuff there, some great insights and inspiration, and I've certainly learned a lot from it. And all the very, very best with it. And as I say, hopefully I can help you out with Spencer with a few things over the coming months.
That would
and
be
years.
wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, take care.
Bye for now.
Thanks for your time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.